Alright, today's chart is Pachuriko. It's a 9 with side switches and foot switches in it. And some crossovers. It was requested by Jazz and Zopher on Twitter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk over it for one run, and then I'm going to run it back to the beginning and talk about some other details about this chart that catches my eye. I think the hardest part about recording this video was playing with no judgments and reading like almost 200 slower than I normally do to make sure that the patterns are readable for whoever's watching this video, so you're welcome. Yeah. So when I think about side switches, I think the important thing to understand is that they really are just foot switches. You're just facing left or right. So any fundamentals you know or are going to learn about foot switches that are facing forward, those apply regardless of the direction that you're facing. So I think about three things in particular, and in this order of importance. One is that the foundation of what you're playing has to be grounded in solid timing. So if you're playing 8th note foot switches in this chart, you have to have really solid timing of the 8th notes. Right? Really deliberate and no guessing about how to play any of those rhythms. Number two is that you want to make sure that the way that your feet are moving from step to step is fluid and flowy. The most important thing for me is that there's no point where you're like stomping on the panel and staying stuck down on the panel for too long. And then particularly for, this is number three, particularly for foot switches in group of 2, you need to make sure to get off of the first note as fast as possible, because if you don't, that panel is going to stay held down, and then the second note's going to drop because you haven't released the panel yet. So those are the three big things. Also, I will say that this took an embarrassingly long amount of time to get a clean run of. So let's go back to the beginning. I think I have just a couple details to talk about. Okay, so here's the first one. I already know that there's going to be a side switch coming up here. And the important thing to realize is that here's the side switch. Right? Side switch. Anytime your side switch is coming from an up arrow, these are going to be played with your heels. Oh, can I spell? Heels. Like, full stop. That's like a rule. If it comes from an up arrow, you're playing the next part with your heels. And hopefully someone's not going to find a counterexample where I'm wrong about that. Yeah, and then so the opposite is true here, where this is a down arrow here. So this side switch is going to be hit with your toes, which if we advance forward, yep, I do end up hitting with my toes here. Those are two big ones. And at least for this chart, that pattern is always true. You can notice on these side switches, I'm really trying to pop up off of the panel as fast as I can. You want to stay moving. You don't want to get stuck on the panel doing the side switches, because that's when you start dropping the second note. The next thing I did want to say is that sometimes there's a jump, and it could be confusing to know which foot the next pattern starts on. But if you notice that on a jump, only one of them has a hold, the foot that doesn't have the hold is going to be the foot that plays the next pattern. Yep, so this is a down arrow that's played with your right foot, which means that on this hold, this is a right and this is a left. Because this right foot is the one that's not on a hold, your right foot then is the foot that's kind of free to move around. Your left foot has to stay on the up arrow, right? So the next pattern that comes up is going to start with your right. So if we just advance forward here, this will start off on the right, and then you're immediately doing a foot switch off the left. So using those holds as a cue for knowing what foot the next pattern is going to start on is really helpful as well. Yep, so this one, the hold ends on, oops, this is, the last jump is on a left and a right here. So since your left foot is the one that's free, then this is a pattern that starts on the left and then side switches into the right. I think the final comment I wanted to make is about foot motions. This is kind of what it looks like to stay floaty and flowy versus if you're stomping and keeping the motion down. Playing the second way is more likely to cause held notes on foot switches, causing you to drop the second note. Here's kind of the same example about staying flowy through side switches. Staying floaty like this is less likely to drop the second note because your first note is definitely getting off the panel. Whereas this example is really stompy, so you're more likely to drop that second note. Anyways, that's all the advice I have for this chart. This is actually a really, really good chart to review. I'm still totally open to other charts as well, so thanks for watching. I'll catch you guys tomorrow.